All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. Um, if you have questions, there is a Q&A box down below. You're welcome to put your questions in there at any time, and then Danielle will answer those towards the end of her presentation. We'll try to get to as many as we can throughout the presentation, and then we can certainly reach out afterwards if there are any questions that were not answered. But it is my delight. Thank you for joining us here with the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library Foundation. My name is Talia White, and I am the Deputy Director of the Library Foundation. And we're just delighted to have you with us. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll send you a link to the recording along with a PDF of the presentation following this session. And we're pleased to offer these free webinars as a way to share valuable information about many of the ways that you can plan for your legacy and to highlight some of the incredible resources that the library has to offer. So again, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A button down below, and we will do our best to get to all of those questions. But now it is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter, Danielle Pritchett. She is originally from Danville, Virginia, graduated summa cum laude from North Carolina Central with her Master of Library Science degree. She has worked in 3 different library systems and has discovered her deep passion for genealogy along the way. And I know that you will learn many things from this session today. And please join me in welcoming Danielle. Danielle, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, thank you. Let me go ahead and get this screen shared. Okay. All right, so let me make sure, get you guys out the way. All right. All right, so can you see that? I just want to make sure before I get started.
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome. So again, thank you to Leah for the introduction, and I'm just happy to be here. One of the few things I like talking about is genealogy. It is definitely my passion. I say it's my life, and it's something that I enjoy doing and helping people along the way. So I wanted to talk about the surprising benefits of genealogy. We'll talk about a little bit what genealogy is, why it's important, some surprising benefits, and just show you some of the things that we offer in the Carolina Room. So the Robinson Spangler Carolina Room, which is where I work, it houses the library's archives and special collections. So within that collection, you will see things like North Carolina History and Culture Collection. And I will say, we don't just offer things for North Carolina, we offer materials for all over. And so that's actually part of my job, is to purchase genealogy materials, like I said, not just for the Carolinas, but other states as well. So we have a fairly extensive collection of research worthy books. So yes, we also have the genealogy collection, we have our archives, and we even have a rare book collection that a lot of people do not know we have. Currently, we are only providing phone and virtual reference during the day, but we do bring people in by appointment only. So if you would like to schedule an appointment with us to either do some one-on-one genealogy work, or if you just want to come and look at some of our materials, you will just have to either give us a call or send us an email, and we'll set up a day and time for you to come in to see us. We offer a number of digital collections that's available for our library customers. The main one is the Vault. I love the Vault because it gives people access to our historic photo collections. We have extensive photos, so we added a lot of those photos to the Vault, and you can download those photos from the comfort of your own home to your computer, and it's high quality digitalizations as well. We also have archive space. Archive space gives you an idea of what we have in our archive collection. If you're at LAC, you might have, if you go to the back, we have a cold storage called the Vault, where we keep all of our archival materials, lots of original materials. So we have to keep them well preserved. So if you want to see what we have in that collection, you can check out archive space. We also give you access to the Charlotte Observer. from 1888 to the present. So if you're interested in searching through newspaper records, again, if you go to our webpage, you have to have a library card though. You can access either text-only versions of the Charlotte Observer, or some of it includes the actual image of the newspaper. We also have the newspaper on microfilm in our collection. We have the Observer as well as Charlotte News. So if there are some dates that you want to look through, you can schedule an appointment with us and we can pull the microfilm for you and you can go through and print out what you need. And lastly, we offer research guides. Again, all the different subjects of genealogy, I try to produce research guides for. Uh, and we also include other resources maintained by partner institutions. So you can always check out our webpage from the Charlotte Meck Library page, or you can also check us out on Facebook. We do have a Facebook page, Robinson Spangler Carolina Room. When it comes to genealogy, again, that's my baby, that is my world. We give people access to a number of genealogy related databases, the main one being Ancestry Library Edition. So I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of Ancestry.com. However, if you're not ready to commit to your own personal subscription to Ancestry, you can come to any of our library branches, get on one of our computers, or if you bring your own device, such as a laptop, tablet, phone, or anything like that, you can connect to our Wi-Fi and you will get access to Ancestry Library Edition for free. There are some limitations, like you're not able to make a family tree or anything, but you do have access to all of the records and you can just download those. You can save them to a flash drive, email them to yourself. So you have access to all of those records for free. Another database that we do offer is Heritage Quest. Now, Heritage Quest is actually powered by Ancestry. They look almost identical. Heritage Quest just does not have the extensive amount of records that Ancestry Library does. But if you want to look through like census records, minor records like that, Heritage Quest is the way to go. And the beauty of Heritage Quest, you can access that one from home. You'll just have to insert your library card number when you do so. So again, Heritage Quest is an option. If you cannot make it to the library, just check out Heritage Quest. And I also wanted to talk about how we are a Family Search affiliate library. If you're familiar with Family Search, that's the LDS Church in Utah, Salt Lake City. That's the hub. They've been collecting genealogy materials since forever. They have a website that is free for everyone called FamilySearch.org. And I highly recommend everyone, especially if you're curious about genealogy, go ahead to go to FamilySearch.org and create a free account. That's the only way you can access their records. But being affiliate library offers you special services. For example, as an affiliate library, we have access to some records that you will not be able to access from home. So if you're using FamilySearch.org and you're looking up records, you might go to click on the image and it might say, in order to view this record, you have to either be at a family history library or a family history affiliate library, which we are. So if the record says affiliate library, you can come to one of our libraries, get on one of our computers, or bring your own device and connect to the Wi-Fi, and you just simply log into your Family Search account and you'll be able to pull up that record that was restricted to you from home. Now, even though we are an affiliate library, there are still some things that we are restricted to. So sometimes you might look at a record and it'll say that you can only access it if you're at a family history library. That means you will have to go to one of the local family history centers, or if you want to be like me, just go to Utah and go to the big family history library there. I will say though, when it comes to the local family history centers, a lot of them are, well, all of them are ran by volunteers. So sometimes they have very weird hours or very limited hours. So you might just want to check out their website to see what their availability is. So again, we have Family Search affiliate access. So again, if there are records you want to look at that you can't see from home, try coming to one of our libraries. And then another one that a lot of people aren't familiar with, the library gives you access to Fold 3. Now, Fold 3 is a database that is geared for military records. So you can find a lot of things like draft cards, service records, muster rolls, things like that. Again, you can access this from home, but it does require a library card. And I found this service card, draft card. This is actually my maternal grandfather's draft card here, Mr. Willie James Watkins, and you can get a lot of good information looking at some of these draft cards. Like I said, this is the World War II. It gives address, date of birth, his birthday, where he's born. Typically, they'll ask you who is someone who will always know where you are, and usually it's either like a spouse or a parent or a sibling, or sometimes just a family friend. In this case, it was my great grandmother, Etna. And then on the back side, because a lot of people don't realize there are two sides to these draft cards, because when you pull it up on the screen, sometimes you only see the first page, but you need to click over because there's things written on the back, such as a description of the person. So grandfather, about 5'7", 130 pounds, Negro, brown eyes, black hair, and dark brown complexion. And in this section here, if they had any kind of scars or anything that's easily identifiable, they would place that there too. So it just gives you a visual of what your ancestor looked like if you're not familiar. Newspaper records, again, if you've taken my classes before, which I'm pretty sure a lot of you have not, I highly recommend it. But newspapers are my favorite resource, and you will see why. We do give you access to some free newspaper databases, such as the Historic North Carolina Newspaper Collection, which is powered by NC Live. That's available for any North Carolina library card holder. So the Historic North Carolina Newspaper Collection is basically newspapers.com, but they restrict you to certain newspapers in North Carolina. Again, I told you about the Charlotte Observer database, which is powered through Newsbank, and we also give you access to the New York Times from the 1980s to the current. There are other free newspaper resources out there. Some of the top ones, Chronicling America, that's powered by the Library of Congress. There's Digital NC, which has an extensive North Carolina newspaper collection, including they have a really good collection of historic Black newspapers. And then there's Google News, and there are other ones out there as well, depending on the state that you're researching. But those are some of the most popular ones. And if you would like to purchase a subscription to any of these newspaper databases, there's newspapers.com, newspaperarchive.com, Genealogy Bank, and Old News. Now, the reason why I love newspapers so much, because you can see your ancestors' names written in documents like census records, marriage records, and things like that. But if you really want to understand the character of your ancestor, you need to look for newspaper articles. Newspaper article here is an example of a crazy story that you might find. I stumbled upon this a couple of weeks ago. It's about one of my cousins whose name is Maxine, and she and her husband had a very interesting marriage, I would say that. So, in the case of this story here, there was this gentleman who was drunk who took a taxi cab over to Maxine and her husband's house, and he knocks on the door, and he's asking, and the husband goes to the door, of course, and he's asking the husband about his wife. And so, why would you do that? I don't know. But in the article, pretty much it talks about how the husband ends up beating the poor man pretty badly, and he ends up in the hospital. So yeah, you can find a lot of interesting, funny stories when it comes to your ancestors. And microfilm, again, one thing that I'm very proud of that the Carolina Room offers is an extensive microfilm collection. We have hundreds of different microfilm reels, including church records, cohabitation records. We have funeral home records, of course, the newspapers, real estate conveyances, a lot of stuff. So again, if you want to see what we have, you can check out our catalog and narrow it down to the format as being a microfilm, and you can get an idea of what we have. Now for the good stuff. So, why is genealogy important? And this is something I always try to stress to people when I'm talking, like trying to get people interested in doing genealogy. So, there are a number of reasons why genealogy is important. One is mostly to satisfy your curiosity. Believe it or not, a lot of times people come to me to do their genealogy or to help them with their genealogy because they might feel like they're related to some sort of celebrity. You'll be surprised how many people come to me saying that they're related to Pocahontas and they just and they want to do the research to prove that. And so, yes, so satisfying your curiosity, whether are you related to someone famous or you just want to know where you are from. That is one of the main things about genealogy. Also, genealogy is important because of family stories. Now, we all have those interesting family stories that are passed down from generation to generation. However, I will say, as a genealogist, a lot of times when people tell me these crazy stories, when I actually do the research to prove the story is correct, a lot of times, in fact, most of the time, the details are wrong. So think about these family stories as the game of telephone. The more you tell the story, details change a little bit. So by the time it gets to the current generation, it's almost a completely different story. So if you have a crazy story of how Uncle Charles passed away, yeah, make sure you do the genealogy to validate those stories. Another reason why people come to see me to do genealogies because a lot of times they think someone has passed away and left them an inheritance. So again, I kid you not, people come to me and say, "Hey, I think someone died. Can you check to see if they own any property and see if they left anything to me?" Yes, people do ask me to do stuff like this. Fun fact, also, people come to me because they might have purchased a house or they're living somewhere and they think it's haunted. So so they reach out to me and say, "Hey, I believe my house is haunted. Can you do some research to find out whether someone died in the house?" And those are actually my favorite stories because, I love a good ghost story. But yeah, so there are ways you can figure that out using city directories and deed records and things like that, and newspapers. My favorite reason for genealogy is for health reasons. I don't know about your family, but I know sometimes in my family, people just don't like to talk about the medical things that are happening. And so you might not be familiar with some of the things that run in your family line genetically. So you can use genealogy to get an idea of some of the things that runs in your family medically, by reading through death certificates and things like that. And lastly, lineage societies. So a lot of times people want to join lineage societies such as like the DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, because a lot of these lineage societies offer things like scholarship opportunities. So in order to get into these societies, you have to prove direct genealogy. So you can't get into it without doing the genealogy work for that. Now, some surprising benefits of genealogy. These are the things that people just might not think about genealogy, as being a benefit. So, one thing is helping adoptees. In my career, I've helped a number of adoptees. They all had different stories. I was able to help them in all different ways. Some were a little bit easier to find, some not so much. This is why, when it comes to like DNA, I always encourage people to do DNA testing, not just to get to know more about your individual family, but also to help adoptees because there are some adoptees who just don't know anything about their biological families. And so the only thing that they have to rely on is DNA matches. And so I know earlier in my career, it wasn't a lot of people testing. And so it just made it very difficult. But now it's become very popular. So again, I'm able to help a lot of adoptees. In the case here, this is probably what my first big case of helping someone. This was at my original library in my hometown, Danville, Virginia, where I got my genealogy start from. And as you can see, this was around 2017. So we were getting ready for some sort of library program we were having. And so he was setting up in my office doing the balloon art because that's his business. And while he was setting up the day before, he overheard me talking to someone about genealogy. I was actually assisting that person. So after that person left, he comes over to me and he's like, "Hey, I have this story that you probably have never heard before. And I'm like, trust me, I've heard it all. There's nothing that surprises me anymore in the world of genealogy. I've heard all the crazy possibilities. So he tells me how he was adopted and how he wanted to find his biological family. So me, one thing of what makes a great genealogist, you have to be nosy. So when he told me this story, I was all in. I'm like, tell me everything that you know, bring it back to me tomorrow so I can look at what you have. So basically, he brought me the little information that he had, and I was able to work my magic, and I was able to find an obituary for his biological mother. But the obituary included all of his siblings. So I use things like social media. People don't realize how much social media can assist with genealogy. And I was able to find his sister and some of his other siblings, and they met each other for the first time. It was this huge thing. As you can see, we made the cover of the local magazine there called Events for that season. And it was also featured on WDBJ 7. So again, you'll get a copy of the slides, so you'll be able to read the article if you would like. But in the picture here, here's Mr. Austin Bond here, and then his sister and brother. So again, bringing families together, using the power of genealogy. Like I said, interesting enough, once this story aired on the news, I received a bunch of phone calls, especially a lot of people from prison. I received a lot of mail from prisoners asking me to find people. I'm like, hold up now. Is this for genealogy purpose? What are you in there for? But no, but I helped other people. Another guy came in after that saying, he was adopted. He actually had all of his paperwork, but they redacted everywhere where it mentioned a name, but it gave a description of his family. And I combed through that stack of paperwork because I was stumped, but I found one place where they forgot to mark out the last name. So based on that last name and the description of where they worked, I was able to find them. And again, but luckily for him, both of his parents were still alive and his siblings, and he was able to meet them as well. So again, that is one of the main benefits of genealogy. It's just connecting families, especially those who just do not know who their biological family members are. Again, another thing is medical discoveries. You know how you go to the doctor, they ask you, oh, what runs on your mom's side? What did your grandparents, what did they pass away from? And some of the information I knew, and a lot of it I didn't, because again, a lot of times people do not like to talk about medical things. I don't know why, they just keep it secret. So thanks to genealogy, I was able to discover that a lot of these things tend to run in my family line: breast cancer, alcoholism, uterine fibroids, and rare cancers. Now, when it comes to the rare cancers, I did my health lineage class for some cancer patients through Novant. It was a 3 week, no, it was a 4 week series. And we brought in geneticists from Novant Health. And so when she heard my presentation and saw the death certificate, she's like, do you realize both your father and two of your grandparents, well, three of my grandparents died from rare cancers? I was like, I had no idea. So again, she said, well, that makes you a good candidate for genetic testing. So again, it could save your life. Now, here's some examples. So here are some examples of some death certificates that I found. Over here on the left, you'll see this is one of my aunts. Her name was Shirley, and she died from breast cancer. And look at her age. She was only 27 years old. So again, breast cancer affects a lot of the women on my dad's side of the family, and they tend to die young. So some in their 20s, 30s, 40s, so on and so on. So because of this information that I discovered, now I took that information to my doctor and I get to do things like early mammograms now. So again, genealogy can save your life. And then over here on the right, looking at a death certificate for my uncle, one of my uncles, my Uncle George, he had complications from chronic alcoholism. So it looks like he died from hepatic coma that he suffered with for 6 days. That was due to alcoholic hepatitis that he dealt with for 2 weeks. And that was due to, look, chronic alcoholism for 10 years. And he died at the age of, look at this, 37. So again, growing up, my dad always used to tell me, he used to say, don't ever drink. But he wouldn't express why. But again, he would say that, but he didn't realize he was talking to a 5-year-old. I don't know what that means. So growing like after I started doing the genealogy, I now discover why he told me not to drink. Because, my grandfather Linwood, he died before I was born. He had DTs because he was an alcoholic as well. And I found several death certificates for uncles, aunts, and cousins who died from complications of alcoholism. And so again, it was one of those things where my dad didn't elaborate. He didn't tell me to necessarily the reasons why I shouldn't drink. So I had to figure it out on my own. So now I know. So again, so this is some of the things that you can find just from analyzing death certificates. And another thing that I realized analyzing these death certificates, if you look on the bottom, it says the Undertaker was Benjamin M. Pritchett. That was a cousin of mine. He's still alive. And I had no idea that we had our own funeral home for the longest time. So we have our own funeral home and we have our own cemetery, which I visit from time to time, help maintain it. Then you can also use genealogy. A surprising benefit is discovering family stories, and I will also include secrets. Every family has those secrets that they don't talk about, but if you do enough genealogy, you can find the truth. So this was an interesting case that I found using newspapers for a cousin of mine. Her name was Mona Lisa Abney. She was born in 1952. She was married to a man named Wilbert Abney Jr. They got married in 1974, and she was murdered in 1978 at the age of 25. Now, one thing I found doing genealogy as well for my dad's side of the family, we have a curse. You're either going to die at 25 or live to be 105. It's hardly any in between. Lots of family members tend to die at the age of 25, and then a lot of family members also tend to die on Christmas. I don't know what it is about the number 25 in the Pritchett family, but it's not good. So a lot of my family members die on Christmas in car accidents. So, of course, every year, do I drive anywhere on Christmas? No, I do not. But this story here of Mona Lisa was national news, and this case is written about in textbooks, and you will figure out why soon. So basically, she was found strangled to death in a hotel in Richmond, Virginia. According to her husband, she went up there for a shopping trip. But if you look at this middle case here, uh, the article here, the father of Mona Lisa said, well, she never goes away on shopping trips. So he was suspicious from the start. But like I said, this article and this story was published throughout the nation. And every time they posted articles about this story, more details emerge. So again, tonight I am teaching my What's the Tea in Your Family Tree class at Steel Creek. You can either attend in person or virtual. But I will take a deep dive into this case, all the crazy twists and turns that came about in this case. But pretty much, again, the murder happened in 78. She was 25 years old. And it remained unsolved for a very long time. In fact, it wasn't solved until 27 years later in 2005, thanks to technologies and DNA. So, pretty much after 27 years of it being a cold case, they arrested and charged her husband for the murder. Again, I left a whole lot of information out. You will need to take the class tonight to figure out this roller coaster here. But this case was featured on a show Cold Case Files. So I think the episode you can find it on YouTube. So if you want to know the strange case of the murder of Mona Lisa Abney, look up the Cold Case Files episode on YouTube. But yeah, you can find a lot of cool or interesting things using newspapers. Again, you can also reclaim lost histories. So this was probably one of my favorite discoveries doing my Pritchett genealogy. No one knew about this when I was asking around. Even my aunt, who is like the oldest one that's still alive, she didn't even know. And I'm like, how did this story get lost? So basically, I had a great great uncle. His name was William Theodore Pritchett. He was born around 1862 in Pittsylvania County. So he eventually he came to North Carolina. He went to Shaw University. He got his degree in science in 1886. After he graduated there, he went to Clinton, North Carolina, excuse me, and he opened up a colored school. So he taught school for like 4 years or so. Then after that, he went back to Shaw University's medical school, the Leonard School of Medicine, and he got his degree. He became a doctor and a pharmacist. He graduated in 1894. After he graduated, he moved down to Augusta, Georgia, where he became one of the first Black doctors in the state of Georgia. And so he was a doctor and a pharmacist. And again, he is my great uncle. Now, I do not have a picture of him yet, but I did find this photo through the Shaw University archives for the medical school, and it was during the time he would have been there. So one of these men is my great granduncle, Dr. W.T. Pritchett. So hearing that he was one of the first Black doctors in the state of Georgia is right, you would think there would be a lot of information written about him. There isn't. There's not a lot of information out there about him. There's information about all the other Black doctors in the area, but I always wonder, why doesn't anyone talk about Dr. W.T. Pritchett? This is wild to me. So then I discovered some news articles that probably gave me an idea why. So in 1911, I find this article here that says serious charge against a local Negro physician. And basically, it doesn't say exactly what the surgery is, but he performed some sort of illegal surgery on a 19-year-old girl. So, putting two and two together, I believe he performed an abortion on this 19-year-old child. And so again, on the bottom here, it says W.T. Pritchett, an Augusta Negro physician, has been arrested, charged with malpractice, and Maddie Cromwell, which is one of his nurses, is held as an accomplice. She is the daughter of a well-known Negro preacher, Pritchett made bond. Yeah, so he performed this I'm gonna say surgery on this 19-year-old girl. He ended up losing his medical license. So he was not allowed to practice medicine anymore. But I told you he was also a pharmacist. So after he lost his medical license, he moved to Savannah, Georgia, and opened up a pharmacy called Eastside Pharmacy. I found this article here, which gave a pretty detailed, description, history about him. And then he later died in 1914. He had pneumonia. So again, based on this information here, is to me is probably why there's not a lot of information written about him. But that's something I'm working on now. I've been researching him for years. I'm going to make a solo trip down to Augusta, Georgia to do some research. And hopefully, maybe I might write a little book about him. Who knows? But yeah, so again, you can find some amazing discoveries using genealogy. And then, of course, Ancestry DNA. Like I said, there are a number of different DNA testing companies out there. I personally just recommend Ancestry DNA because it does have the largest DNA pool. You kind of get more bang for your buck. So again, a lot of times people just want to discover their origin. So I did my test years ago. Most of my DNA comes from Nigeria, and it just breaks it down. And so they update it every few months or so to make it a little bit more precise. But yeah, this is interesting information just using DNA. Now, I will say I am a huge proponent of DNA. Yes, I am. But I also have to tell people when you start dabbling in DNA, you might be surprised at some of the discoveries you might find. I always say, which is my motto, people lie, but DNA doesn't. So you can imagine in my career, I found a lot of interesting things because of DNA for not myself as well as other people. Sometimes they might discover that who their father was really wasn't the father, or even who they thought there was their mother was not actually their mother, it was an older sister. Trust me, I've seen and heard it all. So, yes, I love DNA, but you also got to be prepared. It might unearth some family secrets. For example, I had a lady who would take my genealogy classes when I was still working in Danville. Keep in mind, this lady was like mid 60s, almost 70. Again, so she got excited because she was taking my genealogy classes. She wanted to know more about a particular branch of her family tree. So herself, as well as her first cousins, they all purchased DNA tests together, sent off their results at the same time, the tests the same time, and got their results the same time. But one day she comes bursting in my office. She's like, Danielle, I need you to look at this because this is not making any sense. Soon as I heard those words, I was like, my little spidey senses is telling me something. So pretty much what happened was her first cousins, showed up as matches to themselves, to each other, but they did not show up as matches to her, and she didn't show up as a match to them. And she's like, I don't understand. These are my first cousins. How is this possible? And I'm like, uh-oh. So she gave me access to her account. I looked at it, and come to find out, she had a half sibling match. And then the half sibling match had sent her a message that she hadn't seen yet, and pretty much he said that he was out here trying to find as many siblings as possible. And so when I heard as many siblings as possible, I'm like, what are you talking about, sir? Is it one of those sperm bank things? No, but no, he said that their biological father was like this big time, like stock car racer. And keep in mind, Danville had, and to this day, still has racetracks. So there were lots of races out there. So apparently, the father was going around to all these different races, and he was having fun with a lot of these young girls. And apparently, he met up with the lady's mom and got pregnant. And so after she got pregnant, she married, who the lady thought was her father shortly after. So she was like, yeah, I had to tell her that the guy that raised her wasn't her biological father. And she couldn't ask them anything because they were both deceased. So she was like, I don't know if he knew that I wasn't his or not. She says, but she said, look, he raised me all my life. He will always be my dad. So again, that's some surprising things you can find using DNA. So by now, you should be interested in trying to do your genealogy work if you haven't done so already. Again, one of the main things that I do as a genealogy librarian is I teach people genealogy research strategies. So this is my way, this is the typical approach that I use for everyone. First, I say choose your family line. Decide whether you want to work on your mom's side or your dad's side first. Don't try to do your whole tree at one time. I promise you, you will confuse yourself. You'll give yourself a headache. Just choose one and go. Know where to start. You always start with yourself and work your way backwards. So you start with yourself, then you go to your parents, grandparents, so on and so on. And then you can ask people for more information. I always get people to record everything on genealogy charts. The most common mistake people make when they try to do genealogy is trying to work from memory. And we know our memories are not reliable. So you need to write it down. After you do that, you want to start with census records. And then after you exhaust census records, you did want to move on to other types of records like vital records, military records, newspapers, etc. So a lot of times people feel like they can't get started with genealogy because they feel like they don't know that much. Well, I say that is not true. So again, when I started my career, I wanted to focus on my dad's side of the family because I grew up with my mom's side. My mom, everyone's very well versed on how we're related to each other because they talk about it a lot. But I told you, my dad wasn't the best at explaining things. So I didn't really know much about his side of the family. I knew a couple cousins here and there, but my dad would never sit down and be like, hey, this is how you related to this person. I had no idea. And I will say that my Pritchett family is humongous. So, you know how some people out here only have like a few first cousins, like one to two, maybe five or so. Well, I have over 100 first cousins. And that's because every generation of my family was having about 14, 15 kids. And each of those kids were having 14, 15 kids. So my family is humongous and I didn't know them all. So I honestly started with my dad's side of the family because I honestly did not want to marry a cousin. True story. So, so as you can see, when I started my Pritchett line, I just knew my dad and I knew my grandfather. Like I said, my grandfather died before I was born, but I did at least know his name. So again, that's all I knew, but it's still enough information to get started. Now, over here on the bonus tip, when you have photos, please label photos because there's nothing more unfortunate than having a photo of a person and no one knows who they are because the people who would know who they are deceased. So please take the time to label those photos. All right, so here is a pedigree chart. Like I said, I will also send to Leah a copy of my Genealogy Essentials book that has all the information you need to get started, including these charts. So again, this is what I get people to fill out first before we start their genealogy journey, just to see how much they know. So again, when I started, I only knew up to here. Now, as you can see, I can almost fill out my complete 6th-generation pedigree chart. But remember when I said DNA can change things? Well, it happened to me. So over here on my mom's side, you see the John Watkins here. That's the name we thought for forever was the father of my grandfather. But now, thanks to DNA, I now know that that is not true. Again, that is a whole nother wild, crazy story that you have to, again, if you take my class tonight, you'll hear what happened with that story. But yeah, so now I had to update my pedigree chart thanks to that DNA match that I discovered. And now this is the real father of my grandfather. So I had to tell my mama that her maiden name really shouldn't be Watkins, it should be Banks. So again, DNA can expose a lot of things. All right, so again, I tell you, you need to start researching through the census first. Again, it's just the easiest way. You start with the most recent census and work your way backwards. Now, the most recent census that is available for research purposes is the 1950 census. That became available on April the 1st, 2022. Um, the next census, which is the 1960 census, will not be available till April to 1st, 2032. They wait 72 years from when they recorded the information to make it public record because that was the average lifespan of people at the time. So they wanted people to be deceased before they showed up in census records, which now people are living longer. That is not particularly the case. So the 1950 census is the most recent one right now and the first census was 1790. So breaking it down by generations, I cannot search for myself in the census yet because I wasn't born until 1986. It's going to be a long time before I show up in the 1990 census. So I decided to either search for my father or search for my grandfather first. Now, the story with my father never learned how to read or write. He had to come out of school when he was a young boy to help tend the farm. His father, which is my grandfather, was a sharecropper. So he never learned how to read or write. And he also didn't really know how old he really was or when his birthday was. Because I remember as a kid, I would ask him sometimes, like, Dad, when's your birthday? Sometimes he would say July. Sometimes he would say another random month. And I was like, how do you not know your birthday? But again, that was not uncommon back in the day. A lot of times people did not know their true ages, they did not know their birthdays. And that's both black and white. It's just very commonplace for people to not know because a lot of those records weren't recorded. So you might notice if you look at a lot of records for older people, you might discover that a lot of people are born on the first. And that's because people would just choose a random month and choose the first of the month to celebrate their birthday, or they would choose a holiday. Now, again, my dad in the end chose September 1st. That's the day we celebrated his birthday. Was that his real birthday? No, but that's the one he chose. So again, going to my dad's age, again, I didn't really know how old he really was. He didn't really know how old he really was, and he lied a lot. And he will always say he was 45. Like I said, on my birth certificate, he said he was 45. At the time, his last wife tried to argue me down, told me he was 45. I said, ma'am, my dad is lying to you. He is not 45. He's an old man. He just doesn't look his age. So I decided to search for him anyway, and I did find him in 1950 as well as 1940. Here in 1950, he's about 10 years old. And he's registered as an N for Negro. Now, when it comes to Black people, they classified us based on whatever was the term for the time. So in 1950, it was Negro. 1940 here, where he's registered as C, that stands for colored. And as you can see, the ages are inconsistent because in 1950 he's 10, but in 1940 he says he's 2. Again, the math ain't mathing, but hey. So, working my way backwards, I cannot search for my father anymore, so I will need to search for his father. Now, you might notice that I search for men first. That's because their names don't change for the most part. For the most part, except for my grandfather. My grandfather used 2 names interchangeably. Sometimes he went by Linwood, sometimes he went by Leonard. Why, I don't know. Here in 1950, he's Linwood. Here in 1940, he's Leonard. And so here he is in the 1930, the 1920, and the 1910. Here he's Leonard again. Then here in 1920, he's back to Linwood. And then in 1910, he's Leonard again. So again, I don't know why. He just used both names interchangeably. But you could use these census to get clues. For example, here in 1930 for my grandparents, it says that they were both married. He's 22, my grandmother was 20. And it's here it says 17 to 15. That's the age they were when they got married. So he was 17 and my grandmother was 15. Excuse me. And then over here in 1910 census, there are other clues that you could use. Over here, here's my grandfather Linwood or Leonard, and he's with his parents, which are my great grandparents, Felix and Cassie. Felix is 30, Cassie is 25. They're both married. They've been married for 7 years. And then the next 2 columns are only answered by women. The first column asks, how many children have you given birth to? Cassie here gave birth to 4. The next column asks, how many of those kids are still alive? So in the case of Cassie, all 4 of her kids are alive. So she hasn't lost any children. So, but if you look at the people next door, uh, I will tell you now, these are my great great grandparents. Phyllis here gave birth to 14 kids. I told you it was popping them out. And then only 10 were still alive, which tells you that 4 kids had died. All right, moving on to the next generation to my great grandfather Felix. Here he is again in the 1900 census. Here's Felix. He's the son born around 1879, and he is with his parents, Wilson and Phyllis. Again, this column here asks how many children have you given birth to? 14, but in 1900, only 13 were alive. So naturally, you would work your way backwards 10 more years to 1890, but the 1890 census was destroyed by fire. So unfortunately, there is now a 20-year gap between the 1900 census and the 1880, and a whole lot can happen in 20 years. Some states did have their own state census that you can try to use to see if it will bridge the gap, but unfortunately in North Carolina, it doesn't help because the state census for North Carolina was in 1784 to 1787. So this is not going to help us here. So unfortunately, I have to jump 20 years, 1880 and the 1870 census to my great-great-grandfather, Wilson Pritchett. Here he is here, and then here he is here. Now, this is the turning point when it comes to Black genealogists or Black researchers, because in 1860, what was happening? Slavery. So slavery time was happening in 1860. So when it comes to African Americans in the 1860 census, a good way to kind of determine whether or not your ancestors were enslaved, you need to search for them in the regular 1860 census. If you do find them and they're classified as being Black, that means that they were free people of color. They were considered people. If you search the 1860 census and you cannot find them, then 9 times out of 10, they were probably enslaved. And they wouldn't be in the 1860 census because they weren't considered people, they were considered property. So, as for my family, did I find them in 1860? Yes or no? You gotta stay tuned for the next. So again, next month, Juneteenth celebrations, I will be offering several Black genealogy classes where I talk about the story of my family, or whether I discovered were they enslaved or were they free people of color. So again, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, you will have to register for one of my classes next month. So again, so now, like I said, at the end, I just wanted to highlight some of the classes that I do offer. Again, I have Genealogy Essentials, which is my beginner's genealogy class. This is one of my newer classes, Down the Rabbit Hole, Trusting Your Genealogy Instincts. There's I've Done My DNA, Now What? A Beginner's Guide to Ancestry DNA. I have, again, this class is what I'm teaching tonight. What's the T in your family tree? Volume 1. If you want to hear about all the murderers in my family, you might want to stay tuned for tonight. And because my family is just so full of drama, I had to come up with a volume 2. What's the T in your family tree? Tracing twisted spellings, research tips for unique family names, dealing with people whose names are spelled differently a lot. Her story, discovering the genealogy of your matriarchs. The T in your family tree for teens. Yes, I do things for teens as well as children as well. Health lineage, unlocking your family health secrets. Black genealogy, which is the class you need to take next month. You want to hear about my family and try to figure out their story. Were they enslaved or were they not? Black genealogy, moving beyond the 1870 census. Juneteenth, navigating the slave schedules. Oh, this one is again one of my favorites. Who's Your Daddy? Unpacking the North Carolina bastardy bonds. A lot of people don't know that these records exist, but these are some of the most scandalous records that are out there. And luckily, only a handful of states have these bastardy bond records, and North Carolina is one of them. So basically, what would happen was if a lady got pregnant and she wasn't married, she would get brought into the court to the justice of the peace, and they would make her swear and testify to who the father was. And if she told the father's name, they would then go arrest that man, bring him in, and ask him, say, hey, such and such says that you fathered her child. Is this true? And if he says yes, then he will have to pay a bastardy bond pretty much to take care of that child because North Carolina didn't want to pay for that kid. So basically, it was like modern day child support. But it wasn't always smooth sailing. Sometimes she would refuse to name who the child was, and then they would make her pay the bond. And if she couldn't pay, she would have to go to court and go to jail. And so, yeah, so you can find these records on familysearch.org. But yeah, so these were all so scandalous. Like I said, if you want the real juicy gossip, you need to read through some of these bachelor bonds because some of these court records, the women would have like the exact dates they had relations or adult time. Yeah, it was very detailed and very scandalous, child. It's they are very, very entertaining. So, like I said, I do have that class if you want to know more about these bachelor bonds. And you might think that these records were only for like the 17 and 1800s. No, some of these Bastille Bond records are as recent as the 1950s. So if you have people in your family who had kids out of wedlock, you might want to check to see if there's a Bastille Bond record for them. Just saying. And then let the record reflect using court records for genealogy. Like I said, one thing I try to do for our library patrons and customers is I try to provide conference level workshops for free for the members of our community. So yeah, so those are just some of the classes that I teach. I have more, but these are my most popular ones. So again, thank you for having me. Like I said, my name is Danielle. I am the genealogy librarian. I am available for appointments either in person or virtual. If you want help, starting your genealogy journey, I am here. Please, please don't hesitate to send me an email. So with that, I am going to stop the share and see, did we have any questions? Oh, so Linda asked, where do I get genealogy charts? Which do you recommend? Again, it's a matter of your personal preference. Um, I like the sixth generation chart that I showed you in the presentation, which again, I will send to Talia, the whole workbook that you'll have access to. I like those because they're just easier to read and comprehend. Some people like those fan charts. I am not a fan of the fan charts because it looks confusing once it's completely filled out. But if you prefer those, you can find them on Family Search, or you can just Google a fan chart and just use that. But I like the pedigree charts personally.
If you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. We have time for a couple,
Hmm.
so please feel free. Danielle, one thing I wanted to ask that I thought might benefit the group, if
Hmm.
records that maybe they wanted to share with with you to keep at the library.
Hmm.
They wanted either a copy of it or they wanted the original. What can they do to, like, if they want to share some information with you? What's available?
So if you have things that you think would be, pertinent for our collection, such as like maybe manuscripts or letters or even photos, you can again reach out to us and we can bring you in, and we can scan copies for our records, and you can keep the original. A lot of times people just want to donate them to us because honestly, a lot of times they feel like, hey, I feel like I'm the only one in the family that's going to care about this information, and they're afraid that, say they pass on, it might just end up getting thrown in the trash. So they'll rather have it in our collection where it's kept safe in our archive collection. And so, yeah, so if you have anything like such family Bibles is a good one, any kind of military records or regalia, anything like that, just reach out to us and we'll take a look at it. Myself, John, when we get a new archivist, they'll look at it too and decide whether it's something that's a good fit for our collection. If it's not a good fit for our collection, we'll probably send you to like the universities. Atkins Library, they have a really good archival collection. But if it's anything dealing with Mecklenburg County, for sure, we'll be willing to take it. Like I said, that's the kind of stuff that we look for all the time. So if you have anything like that, just bring it by. Like I said, reach out to us. We'll schedule a time for you to come in. We'll take a look at it. We'll analyze it. Like I said, if you want to keep the original, we can just make high quality scans and have it available for us. Good question.
And we've got a couple questions here now.
Mhm.
How do they find out what sessions you're doing?
So the easiest way to find out the sessions that I'm doing, if you go to our webpage, you can just do cmlibrary.org/events. They'll show you all of our library events. On the left-hand side, you can filter it by the type of program and just select genealogy. Once you do that, all of my programs will be listed there. Most of my programs, I do offer hybrid, whether you can attend in person or virtual. So again, if you can't make it in person, you can still register to get that Zoom link because I am huge on making the information available. So like I said, the easiest way is to look on our webpage. I do create a monthly calendar every month that we put on our the Robinson Spangler Carolina Room Facebook page. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I post my my monthly calendars there as well. So again, just check out our webpage. Like I said, I offer a lot of programs a month. You probably do on average about at least 7 or 8 programs a month. Classes and things like that. So I try to offer things at different times of the day. Sometimes I do things at webinar, like lunch and learn webinar style during the midday. I have some things in the morning, a lot of things in the evening, like 6 to 7:30. So that's the best way to find out what I'm doing.
And you can probably see we've got a couple more questions here, so I'm going to
Yeah.
go through those pretty quickly. Are there property records in North Carolina for any formerly enslaved person who may have owned property after being freed?
Yes. Yes, there are. Like I said, you will have to comb through deed records. Uh, there are grantor and grantee indexes, so you can look through the indexes to find their names, and it'll tell you the exact book number and page number you need to go to. Even though we might not have the physical collection, it just depends on what county they're in. But there are a lot of digital access to these court records. You can find them on Ancestry Library Edition. You can also find them on Ancestry. I call them the hidden records of Ancestry because a lot of these records are not indexed. You have to look through the images, but people don't know how to access those images. So again, I show people in my classes how to find those deed records. So yes, there are North Carolina property records. Mhm.
And then do you have any records specifically Jewish and more national, not North Carolina?
Yes, so again, we have things for all over, not just North Carolina. We have lots of Jewish genealogy and Jewish history books in our collection. Again, check our catalog and just you can just go to our catalog and just type in like Jewish history or Jewish genealogy to see what books that we have. We have a pretty extensive collection. If you see that we're lacking in a particular subject, just send us an email and we'll look to find books for those purposes. But yes, you can find a lot of Jewish records, like I said, on Ancestry as well as uh, uh, Family Search. Family Search is its own separate website that's free for everyone. They have a lot of records for other countries. Keep in mind, it's going to be written in those native languages a lot of the times, but we have computers now that'll translate things for you.
Great. And the last question I have before our closing remarks. Wayne mentions that his great grandfather was born in North Carolina. He was a slave in Arkansas. In the 1870 census, it mentions he was born in Arkansas. I'm trying to find out if there was a slave owner with the last name of Ellis in North Carolina. So could you
Mm-hmm.
tips on how to do that?
hmm So yes, so a lot of times people say, well, what if the slaves changed their last name? That is very possible, but I say, well, just go with what makes sense most. So you can utilize the 1860 slave schedule, which you can use using ancestry.com, Ancestry Library. It doesn't have any slave names there, but you can search for slave owners with that last name in that area and to get an idea of who the slave owners were. And then you can research those slave owners and look for their property records because a lot of times they would list slaves by name. So look through their property records to see if you can find your enslaved ancestor's name. Another thing I tell people, if you can find them in the 1870 census, if you look at the actual census sheet, look and find the closest white family because most of the time the closest white family might be where they were enslaved because people didn't move away, they stayed in those areas. So again, if you see a sheet and it's like a whole bunch of black families, try to find the closest white family, and check their property records as well. Like I said, there are lots of other tips. Like I said, I talk about all of those in my classes. Like I said, next month celebrating Juneteenth, I'll be offering a lot of those navigating the slave schedule, and I'll show you which property records that you need to look through. So yes, so start there. So check out the 1860 slave schedules and then look at the actual 1870 census.
Danielle, thank you so much for your time today. I feel like every
Yeah.
hear you, I learned something new, and enthusiasm is infectious. So I appreciate your time and how much fun you make genealogy. So thank you so much. And to all of you who joined us today, thank you for joining us. I hope that you gained a better understanding of genealogy and the resources that the library has to offer. If you value the library as a resource and want to help preserve it for future generations, I invite you to consider including the library in your estate plans. I'd be
Mhm.
honored to have a confidential conversation with you about how you can make a lasting impact. Please feel free to reach out to me by phone or email. My information will be included as well as Danielle's in the follow-up email that we'll send you. Thank you for spending part of your day with us, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.